episode of Midnight at the Spaghetti Factory. This is me, Matt. I'm going to refer to myself as Matt today because my sister's here with us, and she is also a Rainwater. So my sister Danielle Rainwater is here, and she is, I would say, the main force of No Brow Apparel, a t-shirt company that I have contributed design work for. But the main brunt of it is done through Danielle's labor, through Danielle's work and know-how and knowledge in regards to printing T-shirts. So on today's episode, we're going to be celebrating 420 and talking about substances and their influence on art, on artists, how it impacts them, and in what ways it might in what ways it can be beneficial to the artistic process, but also in what ways can it also not be beneficial to the artistic process. There's a whole conversation going on in regards not just to cannabis, but to psychedelics in general, on their effects on people and on their effects on culture. So anyway, we will be getting into all that today, and I'd like to also allow Zhao to sort of pitch his 2 cents in on the subject.
I prefaced this with both of them before we started recording. I am like a 4-year-old on this topic, going to be asking ignorant, childish questions that may seem offensive to some people who have dabbled or fully engage in substances. I'm not going to say abuse because that's a personal thing, but I am, for lack of better terms, straight edge, not necessarily by choice. Depends on which substance we're talking about. But I've never done a drug. I've never smoked weed once. I've never had a sip of alcohol. I am a total substance prude when it comes to it all. If there's anything even remotely near me, I start getting uncomfortable, and I'm of the mind that all of them are bath salts. And someone's gonna murder me, drain my blood in their bathtub, and I'm gonna be on the news as another unfortunate victim. So again, I am a complete idiot about this, so I will be asking a lot of questions, and I'm hoping not to put these two wonderful people into uncomfortable situations where they have to out themselves about what they've done or how it's affected them. But I guess the only substance I guess I can really claim is good old caffeine.
Caffeine is definitely a substance.
That's
Danielle, do you have an opinion about that?
Caffeine, I mean, it's definitely addictive for sure. I mean, if you want to, you can say it's a drug. Because,
Right.
I mean, some
It
people
makes
can't
me-
function without it.
I wake up at 7:45 in the morning, and by 8:15, 8:30, I have a Coca-Cola in my hand. So that's definitely an addictive
I mean,
habit that I have, and it's pretty much all I drink the entire day. And then I drink one usually right before I go to bed, and even though I have caffeine in my system, I will still go to sleep. I could down a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola, and 10 minutes later, I will be out.
I wish I could do that. If I drink coffee or I just tried there's this new energy. I don't know if they're really new, but the Bang energy drinks. I tried them because a friend was recommending them to me.
Sure.
And I couldn't go to sleep. I just because I'm kind of a naturally anxious person anyway. So my mind's just racing the whole day, and so I just we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but I've basically kind of had to put off caffeine because it's long-term effects on me just aren't beneficial as much as I enjoy when I'm in a creative mode.
Sure.
I enjoy the rush. Because if I drink coffee and create, I feel like I'm on some kind of super serum where I'm just suddenly all the ideas come flowing and everything just starts clicking.
I'm on the opposite end of that, where I feel like it's detrimental to my work habit, where I have so much energy that it contributes to that ADD factor of, let me check Facebook, let me check Twitter, let me check my Robinhood account, let me look at this book, let me see if there's any movie news going on. Oh, is there a new album out? Oh, oh, I should be reading this book. Oh, I need to go do this. What am I having for dinner? And it becomes that drive. It's the gasoline in the ADD car. And I can't seem to focus on anything. And I remember when I was doing my big weight loss thing, Coke Zero was a big part of it. Like I was definitely using that to help with aiding in my weight loss, but I was also
Sure.
consciously trying to get off of caffeine and everything. So I was drinking Coke Zero with no caffeine in it. There were certain ones which they don't have at the moment because coronavirus has like affected production of soda or whatever like that. So they don't
Right.
have the caffeine free version right now. So I'm kind of sucked on it. But either way, I was doing the caffeine free version and I was doing water a lot, and I could tell I was a lot more settled and I could focus in on stuff. And it's very hard once you get on that caffeine train to get back off. Like people do it with coffee, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Whether they're drinking iced coffee all day or they have to have their 3 cups of Joe in the morning before anyone talks to them, it's definitely up there. So to me, that's my
Yeah,
only experience with any kind of substance, and it's all been I don't want. Yeah, it's bad. I guess I should have just admitted it. I'm not even gonna try to defend it. It's bad. So I'm curious to know from the two of you if there's any substances that you've dabbled with that you felt were productive in terms of creativity or even just production wise, like you know what I mean, like how any of them have aided it. Not necessarily. I know 420 is technically supposed to be a holiday for marijuana, right? Not necessarily all substances. I don't know if they each have their own holiday, but
Danielle, would you happen to know a little bit better? Because I feel like you might be a little bit more clued into that aspect, like that cultural aspect in regards to cannabis.
About the 420 thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just a holiday.
Unfortunately,
I
not really recognized yet.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I looked into like the story about how it started, but I can't remember.
I
It
can't
was
remember. I
supposed
know
to
it
be
too, but I can't remember at the moment. It had
Yeah,
something to do
it's
with
like
4:20 p.m. and then right.
yeah, it was some kind of code like to buying marijuana. People would say like 420, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the whole story on that.
But how is it like? Because now I've searched the No Brow Apparel Instagram, and not to attach a stigma or anything like that, but there is a lot of tie dye, like colors and influence and stuff on some of the shirts that I saw, and that's usually associated with like the hippie movement and marijuana in general and stuff like that. So, like, is that like a part of the brand that you were going for? Is that like the audience that you were trying to speak to? Like, how has that particular, how has like marijuana been like has it been a part of your brand and your business, or is it just happy coincidence?
Oh, I mean, for sure. Like when I first started out, it was like pretty much all marijuana, and I'm sure
Like you were selling marijuana, or you
no, like
were
like pretty much all the designs were marijuana influenced. And
so
I'm sure like consuming marijuana had a lot to do with that, um, with just like putting those ideas out.
Yeah, let's
But
talk about the process a little bit too, because basically, like Danielle would come up with the ideas for a lot of the designs, and then I would go off of her ideas, and then we'd have a back and forth of like, okay, here's what I'm thinking, what do you think? And then she would, because like she kind of in a way acts as the CEO basically of the t-shirt company and sort of makes the final decisions on what designs are the ones that like go to print, because she's the one who does the printing. And so I'm saying all that because it's basically, I don't know, how do you feel about me describing this, Danielle? Would you say like essentially it's sort of like ping pong a little bit, where we kind of bat back and forth to each other, like how things go until we get to a final design?
oh yeah, it's definitely a collaboration for sure.
how much and now when you guys are talking about ping ponging ideas, are you stoned when you're doing like is it like how is marijuana involved in that process, or is it just you had an idea when you were smoking, and then when you what's the word, is it sober technically when you're not high, is
Sure.
that the correct
Sure,
verbiage? Is that when you reflect back on the time when you were high, and then you were like, oh, that was an idea I had when I was high. That was fun. I remember that. It stuck with me. Like kind of like a dream state. Like you wake up in the
Yeah.
morning and you're like, oh, that was a fun dream. But I only remember that there was a warehouse and there were wooden crates and it said, giant balloon on one of the crates, and that was what stuck with me. Like how does that work in terms of, because again, I've never been high. I don't know what that sensation is like, how it affects your mindset or anything like that. So I'm just trying to
you want to take that question first, Danielle?
Yeah, let me just say, I'm trying to think how to answer this. I don't think I would have started any of this had I not like started using marijuana like daily, because society isn't really encouraging people to be creative. So it wasn't something that I like got into until I started smoking. But like I've had ideas when I'm sober, and then also I'll get ideas when I'm stoned too, but it's more of like I'll just kind of sit on them for a while, and then like the next day when I'm sober, I'll kind of go into them more.
Yeah, that's I like the way that you're putting that, because there is like a common what's the word? Like archetype for the stoner type of person, where it's like you have stoner ideas where it's like midnight, you're high off your ass, and you're like, well, what if the plants are the ones who are telling us what we need to do, and then blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
and there is a certain reality to um cannabis is kind of I would describe it as a multifaceted drug. It has a lot of dimensions to it, in the sense that
well, because there's two versions, right? There's and I'm gonna butcher this, sativa.
No, go for it.
Sativa and oh god, what's the other one? They're like one's an
Indica.
upper, one's a downer or something, right?
Kind of. Yeah, there's sativa and indica.
That's
Sativa is considered like the mental high, or I can't even tell you properly which is which,
Okay.
because people will say like, oh, sativa is this, but I describe sativa as like a cup of coffee to me. I get very mentally energized and I start thinking a lot, and I'm also more active, like more physically active, or want to do stuff. Indica for me is more like I want to be lazy and sit on the couch and watch 2001: A Space Odyssey for like the 15th time, and then get munchies, and then just like sit there and eat popcorn.
Yeah, I love indica.
But but and that's why I say it's multifaceted, because there are, like you're saying, depending on the strain, you have there are different impacts on your psychology. But also, it can be. Have you ever heard the term set and setting?
No.
Set and setting is a way of defining. This is language that was brought up in the counterculture, and I'm gonna credit it to Dr. Timothy Leary. I don't know if it actually is his idea, but he was definitely one of the people who popularized it. Timothy Leary was a guy one of the main influences on the counterculture of the 60s, who brought LSD into popularity.
Okay.
And he popularized this idea called set and setting, which is that the impact of a like a psychotropic drug is directly based on where you are at the time and how you're set up for the trip, basically. So like this applies not just to acid or shrooms or any of the other entheogens, but it also applies to marijuana too. Like if you're in a bad mood, and by the way, I would say this is the same for alcohol. If you're in a bad mood and you do any of these drugs, you could probably apply it to caffeine too, you're going to amplify that bad mood.
Sure.
Like you're going to amplify your situation. Do you have anything that you would want to add to that, Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that it exposes your subconscious to you. So if you're going through something, that you don't really want to deal with, and you partake in this substance, then you're gonna have to face it head on, pretty much.
So it's not really a way to escape, which isn't that usually what a lot of people try to do, is like they try to escape their
Yeah.
problems
Well,
by smoking up or something like that. Like if so, how how does that rationale work?
I think that's one of the misunderstandings about it is like, I mean, for me, it doesn't numb me. For me, it like I have to explore myself with it, which it's therapeutic for me,
Okay,
but maybe not for other people.
okay, that's fair. Um, so I'm curious to know because and Matt, let me redirect really quick to you.
Yeah.
Is
Sure.
there like did you create anything that right off the top of your head from something that had like a thought that like passed through your head when you were high? Because right off the top of my head, a warlock from a trailer park is not something I think that anyone could come up with sober. But you're welcome to correct me on that. And then that's
Surprisingly, surprisingly, all that stuff started before I ever got into pot.
okay.
Like, yeah, all that stuff was influenced by writers who were stoners, though.
Okay,
So,
so then it's secondhand.
yeah, exactly.
But I'm curious to know, like, and this is for both of you. Do you find that you're more creative when you've smoked, or even just taking it in? Like, I guess the brownies are a thing and all that kind of jazz. But, like, is it actually some kind of a creative fuel, or does it open you up to different possibilities? And then when you come back down off of it, the question is, do you ever look at it and go, "Yeah, I'm not using that idea because that's nonsensical."
You want to take that first, Danielle?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say it gives me a lot of creative juice. But then again, like you said, I I'll come up with all kinds of ideas, and then the next day I'm like, wow, that's really stupid. Like, only if you're high would that be a great idea.
But sometimes that would be the idea, right? That's the ideal. Is like you're appealing to, like, if that's your business demographic, then you'd be like, that's
Yeah.
a horrible idea for other people, but for who my audience is, like, that's perfect.
Yeah, that's true. I guess another part of it is like coming up with all of these ideas, and then the next day, or not even, it's not even like coming up with ideas when you're high versus when you're not high, and then just kind of sitting on those ideas, and then just kind of like wading through them and saying, okay, maybe not this idea. Let's chunk that one and go back to the drawing board, so
Or
to
you can
speak.
pick them apart and say, that's a really cool aspect of this idea that I came up
Right.
with, and I'll
Right.
take that and I'll apply it to something else. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would to go on to your question, Joe. I would say that any time that I have done cannabis, I have explicitly done it under the notion that I'm not gonna be productive
Mm,
for the next, like, however long this is, which is usually between 2 to 5 hours. And so I have tried to be productive
yeah.
on weed, and it doesn't work for me. Like, I know there are people for whom, like, they have to get high to be productive, basically, or like it enhances their productivity. I can't relate to it. I don't know how they do it. I haven't figured that out.
I don't know
Um,
either.
I have tried it in the past, like, when I was coloring Plants vs Zombies, and I would get into states where I'm like focusing on like singular pixels and like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, I don't, like, I need to pull out what is going on here, and then I end up putting away my work because I can't concentrate. So, but it has been great for coming up with ideas later on, where it's like the next day, maybe something that I was thinking about, or something that was kind of going on in the back of my head while I was like watching Looney Tunes or something,
Mm.
while I'm just laying in bed and doing whatever, like, something comes out. Now, here's the other thing, though. I will say cooking is a totally different thing. Cooking while high, that is where the magic happens. Like,
Oh.
throw out the recipe books, just like, because it's in that state when you're like, if you're in like munchy state, like there's this automatic connection that happens between brain and like the internal recipe list where you just like come up with weird things that work out. I highly recommend it. That's all I'll say.
See, that's the thing with me, because you know me, I love to cook, and when I'm thinking, like, that's how my brain functions normally, and that's actually a topic that I wanted to bring up with you guys, which was
dude, by the way, graham cracker fucking chicken tenders.
Oh wow.
It was delicious.
Was it, like broccoli and bacon cheese or whatever?
It was graham cracker crusted fried chicken with a side of sugar steamed broccoli topped with bacon cheddar sauce.
Yeah, that's fucking stoner food.
See, but that's the thing. And like I said, I have never smoked once in my life. I've been around people, but I don't even think I've gotten a contact high. Like, and so like that's the kind of shit that my brain comes up with normally. Yeah. So I'm almost afraid that if I ever dabbled, it would be the weirdest things where I'd be like, I'm going to make fried chicken coated in Fruit Loops. Like, it'd just be like completely batshit crazy. But I'm curious to know, like, do you think that it's almost like cheating to use a substance or something like that? Because for the longest time, I was very ignorant with it, and I was just like, oh, I don't need to do any of this because I am good. There's more merit in doing it by yourself. That's the hard way, and da-da-da-da. But nowadays, I'm a little bit more chill about it. I'm just like, whatever fucking works and gets your best stuff, as long as you're not hurting anybody, that's the best way to go about it. Like, I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll reply, and then Danielle, I'd love to hear what you had to say too. But I'll just say, like, my personal view on this is I don't think any artist or creative person or whoever needs to do drugs at all. Like, you could go your life and never do drugs and you'll be just fine. I think for certain personality types or certain people who have maybe people who have a tendency to go into more abstract places, it could benefit you. Sure. But at the same time, it does come with inherent risks. There is an indication statistically, in terms of just studies that have been done, that for certain individuals, cannabis can trigger latent schizophrenia. Cannabis can bring on depression for certain people. Can cause paranoia. There are definite side effects to using it, and it's important to go into using any substance with full knowledge of the effects it could have on you personally.
I had no idea.
I personally look at this as you're creating a relationship with a substance. Like we all have in this group right here, we all have a relationship with caffeine, right? And I have a relationship every once in a while with marijuana, with pot, and sometimes I have a relationship with shrooms, and those are each very different relationships that have different aspects that either have an impact on me, like personally, psychologically, creatively, or intellectually. So I'll leave it at that for my response. Danielle, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, for me personally, marijuana. Okay, so I have some mental health issues. Like, I have depression and anxiety, and also I have really bad back pain. So for me, marijuana, it helps me to basically just function without having to use like pills and whatnot. So I wouldn't say that it's like cheating. I would just say, like, for me it's medicine.
So so like you're talking about like day-to-day function. I'm talking about like creatively. Would you say that it's like something that's aided your creativity? Like, have you thought of things while you were high that you never would have thought of sober? Do you know, or like, and I'm talking
Sorry, I
like
never answered your question.
that's no, it's absolutely fine. I'm just curious to know
Yeah.
like the direction in which it takes you. Is it just apples and oranges, or is it like there is a step above logical sober thinking that it can elevate you to? I'm just curious to know your opinions on that.
Yeah, Danielle, so you go first, Danielle. Do you feel like it's cheating to use pot to enhance creativity?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know because I have creative thoughts when I'm sober and when I'm high too. So, I mean, I guess.
I was gonna argue it might be cheating to be creative, not on pot.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
that's
it's. I would make the argument that they're kind of lateral moves because it's different forms of creativity, and also like stoner art might only be appealing sometimes to stoner people. So
Well,
you know what I mean? Like
I can actually, and this is the thing, and I started us off by saying that I am quote unquote straight edge, never done any substance other than caffeine, I guess you could say, and yet I will openly admit to anyone who will listen, some stoner movies are some of my favorite fucking flicks.
Sure.
And no one seems to understand why, because I used to be very adamantly against all substance. Like I was like a Nazi, like do not drink, do not smoke weed. Like I was crazy hardcore about it. I think even when we were in college, Rainwater, I think you might have remembered that was a little bit a cornerstone of my personality back then. But like that movie How High with Method Man and Redman is like one of my favorite fucking movies, and no one can get an understanding how that, like, I'm a walking contradiction when it comes to it. So it's like, you know, I guess there are things about it that have always appealed to me, and it's kind of like one of those things where people just like run away from things that they're curious about. And I've always said that if the opportunity presented itself, well, not always, but more recently, I would be open to doing it if I felt like I was in a comfortable setting with people that I trusted.
That is a wise decision. I would recommend that to anybody who's going to do something for the first time. Absolutely.
Yeah, but the downside is now that I got a kid and my wife is very much my wife is very much on the no you don't kind of train because you know, it's one of those things where, you know, she's not necessarily an artist, so that's why I'm kind of interested about it, because you brought that point up, Matt, where it's like you could go the entire time as an artist, like a lifetime, and never do drugs. But, you know, it's a commonly talked about thing within the art community. It doesn't matter what medium you dabble in. Like marijuana is like one of those things that runs kind of rampant in the art community. Like every artist is interested in some kind of substance. You could talk about writers. Writers are supposed to be alcoholics. You know what I mean? Like everybody, like that's the stereotype. And so as an artist who's always been, and again, not always by choice, straight edge for 35 years of my life, it's always been that other side of the fence that I feel like everybody else is dancing and partying on, and I'm the guy, you know, just sitting in his yard alone going, I can make art too, you know. I don't need drugs to have fun. And it's one of those things where I am very curious about it. So I got to ask another question, which is, oh shit, now I lost my train of thought. So I was going to ask the other thing, which was if there were any other drugs that you, like Matt, you mentioned shrooms, but if there's any other things that you've done that you found helped you in a different creative way from marijuana. So like marijuana takes you in one direction, and shrooms probably takes you in another. Have you ever compared and contrasted the thoughts that you have on different substances? And, you know, there's like one particular type, because, and I'm going to get to this in a minute. I'm going to let you guys answer this, but I'm also going to, in the chat for this recording session, I just sent a link to this article that I found about an artist who drew self-portraits of 50 days on 50 different drugs. So I'm
I
curious.
love that. Yeah.
I
that's
want to
pretty
know
cool.
I want to know your guys' perspectives first, but then I want you to definitely open up that window if you can, so we can talk about his different portraits. But go ahead and talk about your different experiences first.
Yeah. Do you want to? How do you feel about going with that first, Danielle?
Okay, what are we doing?
Not the
The
article first.
artist?
We're talking about personal experiences first, and then we'll jump into the artist. Unless you think that the artist will. I don't know if you guys have tried 50 different drugs. There's a pretty long
No.
list.
I mean, I've kind of tried a lot of drugs, but I don't know about 50. Um, yeah, I mean, I would say I've never done shrooms like Matt has. I've only microdosed psilocybin. I will say that like that will give me more like energy to like finish like projects and stuff. Um, whereas marijuana will, it's more of like a headspace type thing where I can
Mm,
just kind of
relax.
like adventure through my own mind. Yeah, just relax and like come up with the ideas.
Can I
Um,
interrupt you for a quick question to ask both you and Matt
yeah.
this question? Matt, we've talked before, and I think it's episode 2, the notorious episode where we looped for 3-4 hours, whatever, about knowing when to stop.
Which is-
Um,
Anybody who is listening to that while they're high would fucking lose.
but the question that I wanted to ask both of you is, as an artist, there is a tendency to constantly keep working on a project because I think we all know it's almost never perfect, and we'll keep working until we run ourselves into the ground. Is marijuana almost a way, because it does relax you, as you guys have said, a way for an artist to kind of step back and turn off the that driving force in their head that says you have to keep working on this, you got to keep working on it. It's almost like it's an escape from your self-starter notion that you have to be working, you have to get this done, it's got to be what you see in your head. Is marijuana kind of like the solvent of that problem?
That's exactly how I've used it in the past because I would get into sort of frenzied work states to the point where it's like I can't relax for the evening.
Yeah.
So like usually if I've ever done cannabis, it's in the evening because it's like as a way to help myself just like chill out and step away from work so that I can like go enjoy things, enjoy other art, and like especially music. I really love listening to music high because it makes it just for whatever reason seems to enhance my ability to discern different instruments and the composition and all the stuff that goes into making music. So I would, for me, like my personal best use case for cannabis is it allows me to better enjoy like culture, enjoy art, enjoy food. It's from my perspective, it's a very hedonistic in as a drug. Like it makes everything kind of more enhanced. What about you, Danielle?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I love like watching films when I'm high and just like dissecting them. And like also like the colors are more vibrant and everything. So it's definitely like hedonistic in that sense, I guess, because I feel like I can enjoy it so much more.
Now, so I'm curious because that used to be one of the sticking points, like a contention with me when I remember when we were in art college, when me and Matt were at SCAD.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically Spider-Man 3 was coming out, and this was, to our listeners, this was before we knew what we were getting into. Everybody was psyched for that fucking movie. But I just remember
that was quite a night too, because we were all like, "What the fuck are we watching?"
Well, the thing, and that's the point that I wanted to bring up was, I don't remember who said it specifically. I don't think it was anybody in our group, but it was somebody that I knew. It was like, I am getting so fucking high and going to this movie. And now it's a Sam Raimi movie to begin with, so it's a little bonkers and out there. But like, there's also bold, vivid colors, and I gotta imagine that high that was pretty crazy. But then I'm thinking to myself, doesn't that get a little distracting? Like you don't get to absorb the film and the theme and the narrative and stuff as well as you would sober. Like I almost felt like it's a detriment to watch a film high the first time. Like I understand watching on like repeat viewings, doing it in different states where you would be like, yeah, I could watch that movie. Like when Rainwater dragged me to Speed Racer, I fucking was dragged kicking and screaming. But in retrospect, I loved that movie when I came out of it. He'll even tell you, he totally flipped me when I watched that movie. But when I watch it now, I'm thinking to myself, man, if I watch this high, I would never know what the fuck is going on because the colors and the racing and all that stuff is fucking crazy. So I'm wondering, is it bad to watch a movie like that high the first time? Do you know what I mean? Like, because it definitely fucks with your, would it fuck with your understanding of what's happening, or I'm just completely in the.
First, Danielle.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that kind of answers the reason why I watch movies like 10 times, because like I usually watch them high the first time. Yeah. So there's this movie called Calm with Horses. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not.
But and it also has another name called The Shadow of Violence, I think. But anyways, it's just it's just like the visuals are really beautiful, and it has a really good like music score. But every time I would watch it high, and I would watch it like I think I've seen that movie like 10 times. But that kind of just goes into what you're saying with like each time I would watch it, I would go into like the visual elements. Like the second time I would go into like the musical elements, and then the third time I would go into like the acting and like the different people. So I kind of went on a tangent and forgot what the question was.
If you feel like it's harming your viewing experience just to be, out of, I don't want to say out of your mind, but high when you're watching something like a narrative on the initial thing, like does it shape your opinion the wrong way? Because like there's been times when my idealism when it comes to filmmaking is if you sit down for a movie and you you're in a particular mood. Like for example, I sat down and started watching the film. I think it's District 9. It's a Neil Blomkamp movie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I think I've heard of it.
I started watching District 9 when I was at work when I was working for ESPN. I was watching a render thing go, and I was pissed because I had to be at work on a Saturday, and I wasn't able to see my girlfriend, and my grandfather was in the hospital. Halfway through that movie, my grandfather died. So I was affected by that, like the circumstances of which I was watching that movie. So I will not watch that movie anymore because all I associated with it is those bad feelings. My grandfather died. I'm stuck at work. This is a drain. And I can't watch that movie without, getting hit with that experience all over again. So I'm wondering, the initial experience, does it affect your enjoyment of a movie that you wouldn't have? I mean, I guess I'm answering my own question because external circumstances can shape how anybody is when they're watching a movie, so you really need to kind of decide it. But I think with substances, you're making a decision to go into watching it like that. With me, I did not decide to go to work. I did not decide to have my grandfather die that day. So I'm just curious to know if it's a detriment to watch or consume like art and storytelling when high for the first time, because it'll shape your initial impression. You know what I mean? Like first impressions. That's the thing.
I would say that's another example of set and setting where it's like how you're going into it definitely impacts it, and then depending on the substance that you have in your system, that's going to further amplify it. But I've seen a bunch of movies in theaters high when I was in Portland, and never ever again am I going to watch a superhero movie high. I watched several superhero movies high in the theater, and after a while I started thinking I was like watching CIA propaganda, and like got way into the rabbit hole of like trying to pick everything apart thematically in the movie.
And that's marijuana, or was that another drug?
That was marijuana.
See, and
straight up
I didn't know that marijuana could take you down that rabbit hole. I was thinking that's pure LSD or something.
No. And this is actually like there's a lot of historic evidence about marijuana's impact on people who, especially people who get very like into major political affiliations. It can impact you negatively. It can make you kind of paranoid. And so like this is why I was bringing this up earlier, that you have to be careful with substances, because if you're not in a great like mental state,
Yeah.
and like during a lot of my time in Portland I was not in a great mental state. So like I there were a couple movies where I was like seeing things in the movie where I was just like that weren't really there, you know.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
like, when I say seeing things, I don't mean like literally seeing things, but like pulling elements out of the plot,
Sure.
making messages that weren't really the messages of the themes of the movie or whatever.
Okay.
On the other hand, like I watched Interstellar high, and it was one of the best experiences ever.
I'm
One
sure
of the
that
best
would
movies.
probably make the movie make more sense because I've seen that movie sober and I fucking hate it, and that's probably why.
It's really interesting because there's a segment of that movie when Matthew McConaughey goes into the black hole.
I knew that's where you're going.
And you see time like
Mhm.
meshed out in this weird pattern.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of what it's like to trip on shrooms. Because on shrooms, time dilates in kind of odd and fascinating ways. And when I was watching it, and I was high when I was watching it, I was like, did the people who did the special effects for this, like, did they trip on shrooms? And like, this is like influencing their creative,
Yeah.
interpretation of what this would look like. So that's like a positive example, right? Because like I started with a negative example that was like, CIA propaganda campaign, and then the positive example is like seeing how seeing how it's possible, like the line of influence of different things on art, or the impact of different things on art.
Well, because the
But
interesting thing to me is when you're watching a movie, the whole idea is suspension of disbelief, like doing things where the audience isn't going to think, "Oh, I'm watching a movie." Where I feel like when you're watching it on like a substance, you have less risk of getting pulled out of the movie. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like you're more likely to just buy whatever the movie is selling and
Yeah.
just be like, "Whoa," like you're in it.
that there's definitely movies that are like that. And for me personally, they happen to tend to be more musical in nature, like
Like
Rocky Horror
musical
Picture Show
musicals?
High.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like Rocky Horror Picture Show High is like one of the best things ever for me. Like I last time I did that, like I was like, I need to come up with a musical. I need to make a musical. Like it was a very, very life affirming experience. But what, Danielle, how about you? What do you have anything else to say in regards to that subject?
About like movies and
Well, just
Yeah,
about
are you
initial
going to take it to art
yeah.
music in general?
sorry, I kind of spaced out. What?
So like no, I think we were just talking about like the initial impression factor. Like if it's better to watch
Being,
it the
like-
first time high, or if it's kind of negative to watch it first time high. I'm just curious to know your opinion on it.
Yeah, no, I don't know why, but like anytime a new movie comes out that I'm really excited about, like my first thought is, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get high and watch this movie."
Yeah.
Like the Green Knight, I think that comes out in July. Like the first thing I want to do is I want to get high and I want to watch that movie.
I will say, yeah, both you and me watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The first time we watched it stoned, and the best movie to watch stoned because
Yeah.
the scenes where like Brad Pitt's just driving through Los Angeles just feels like the most like chilled out summertime like thing. Like I felt very much in that scene during that movie. But I've watched it sober too, and it's a great movie both ways. Like I wouldn't complain either way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me personally, it just enhances the experience because I don't when I'm sober and I'm watching movies, it's really hard for me to concentrate. I don't know why, but maybe it's just a part of like being high and in that like leisurely state that I can get more into the movie.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So I sent you guys that article about the artist who did 50 self-portraits off of 50 drugs. His name was Brian Lewis Saunders. And this was done in 1995. So this is quite old, but
Yeah, because I remember seeing this article back in SCAD. I think I've seen it a couple of times. It's really cool though.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Jao?
Nothing. So I just wanted to go through the paintings one by one,
Yeah.
or the drawings one by one, and maybe
All right.
if you guys have had any experience with these particular substances, feel free to chime in, or just
Yeah,
you know
let's go
talk
for it.
about your impressions of what he actually did. So the first one right off the bat is acid, and
Yeah,
I'm
I've
looking at
never
this, and that's some
taken-
scary shit.
I've never
Um,
taken an active dose of acid, and by active I mean enough to actually like be on a trip.
Okay.
But I've seen a couple of different things like this with people who have done acid, and I still don't really know like what that space is like.
Hmm.
I get the sense that because I've heard people talk about being able to sense energy or auras or whatever, like they see.
Definitely.
Charlie Murphy.
Yeah, they see like they see people as energy and stuff, and that's what I get from looking at that picture where it's like
Yeah.
everything kind of like matter kind of dislocates a little bit and it becomes more, I guess, about energy. I don't I've never been
Yeah.
that high. I can't say I've been that high.
I've tripped on acid once, and I can confirm this image is a lot like the experience.
Wow.
It's a lot of everything is energy, pretty much. That's how I would put it. And it was a really pleasant experience, even though this picture looks kind of like sinister.
Yeah.
The black
Like-
eyes are
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
the white pupil is very
Yeah.
off-putting, and then the Pepsi logo on his nose is not doing anything for me either.
The Pepsi.
See, that's the kind of shit that I see
That-
into this.
That's propaganda.
All right, so then scrolling down, the very next entrance is Ritalin, and that actually looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Although he snorted it. That's he does list the intake format.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Ritalin. I've dabbled in Ritalin a bit. I would just say it really helps you concentrate and gives you a lot of energy. And I mean, it looks like he's got a lot of I mean, what's it called? There's like a lot of detail, kind of.
Yeah,
yeah.
there's
There's
definitely
like a lot of focus for sure.
Yeah.
on-
Yeah.
especially on the face.
Yeah, the face has a lot of very focused.
Okay, so I'm looking at the next one, which is marijuana, and I cannot help but laugh because it's I don't know how to describe it because I mean there's a rainbow hair with a photograph cutout of maybe this guy as a kid, and it looks like it's Ash Wednesday on his forehead, and that he did the rest of it in finger paints with and then he put like his car key on a string and made that a necklace.
What
Can
the
anyone
hell is this
explain to me
marijuana?
what the thought process might have been when going into this?
Yeah, I don't. It's very. Go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, I was just saying, I want to know what kind of weed he was smoking because this
Kind
is-
bud. Does that ring a bell? That's what's
Kind
listed above. Kind bud.
Hmm.
Doesn't sound familiar to anybody? No, okay.
I've never tried it.
Yeah, like Danielle said, I'd love to know what that is. I mean, I don't. It's a very like childish kind of portrait.
Yeah.
And so I get the sense that whatever he was feeling must have been very loose and just like, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But also, it seems like a lot of the things on here are very symbolic.
Mm.
Like the key seems like a very symbolic thing. It must represent something to him. What looks like a pot leaf on his forehead, I'm assuming is symbolizing like how it's influencing his mind right now.
Okay.
And then
The bloodshot
I'm
eyes,
gonna-
definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and go kind of where you were saying with the picture of the kid is probably him as a kid, and maybe that's a reference to how this is him being very like being childishly creative.
Mm.
I don't know.
Oh, maybe it almost looks like he's got like good vibrations coming out of his head.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Well, I mean, you know what? Good vibrations is a great way to describe it because if you notice um, the goatee is shaped like a heart, so it's almost like he's
Yeah.
speaking
Oh.
love and you know what I mean, like good vibes and that kind of stuff. So that's.
hence the
Yeah.
like bright, vibrant colors too. Yeah.
But then we go to one glass of Pruno. Now I've never
I don't
even
even know what
heard of
it is.
Pruno.
I
Yeah.
don't know what that is.
Given what the painting looks like, I don't think I want to know what Pruno is because
Right.
it looks like a weird cross with
Oh.
his face reflecting in it, and I also see his nipples and yeah, that's a
It almost looks like
strange-
he's in a grave or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that too.
It reminds me of a lot of pre-World War II abstract expressionism art. Like, yeah, it does not look like a good mood.
Well,
Just looking at
No.
I also like how there's like almost like a newspaper print on the side next to it where it says Pruno, and then in parentheses below it says see reverse for instructions. I don't know what that means, but okay.
I don't think I'll try Pruno.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
so either. 4 milligrams of resputerol. I don't know if I pronounced
know.
that correctly. I've heard of this before, but I don't know
Resputerol.
anything about it.
Is that like an antidepressant?
Maybe? It sounds very controlled substances
Or
kind of
yeah.
name.
So I'm gonna guess that 4 milligrams is like way above prescribed dose.
Yeah. The portrait, I guess, is him as a very, very simplistic drawing, and he's surrounded by a kind of a cool, multicolored circle vibrancy.
Yeah.
And then he's got typed out thoughts going. It's almost like a thought web, like you know how we used to do in school, where it was like draw a circle and then you draw these thoughts off of it, and that's just kind of where he's going. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like all the words are referencing like psychological, I guess psychological disorders.
Yeah.
Schizotypal personality disorder.
Schizotypal. Yeah.
That looks intense.
Yeah.
That looks like I really don't have a one-to-one comparison, but it doesn't look necessarily bad, but it looks super analytical from what I'm seeing.
It's almost anxiety inducing in a weird way.
I
Yeah.
would say the same. And despite the vibrancy of colors going around him, it feels very bland because of the paper that's surrounding it it's almost like it's been drenched in rainwater. No pun intended to the two of you. But it looks like it's been sitting out in the rain and then brought back inside and dried. Like that's the kind of like vibe that I'm getting from it. Then whatever the next day was, he did 250 milligrams of soma. I don't know what soma is.
I don't know.
Soma is it's a muscle relaxant.
I get that vibe because it looks once again kind of childish, but it's almost like he's melting. It's him in a bathtub.
Yeah, he's very drippy and relaxed.
Yeah, I don't know if I want my muscles to feel drippy. That's one of the biggest things. Not to get off of this topic, but that's one of my biggest things about substances is I am fucking afraid of the things that I might feel. I am a very controlling person by nature. I don't like to be out of my comfort zone. So the idea of relaxing too much scares me. And
there's a lot to be going to cannabis. There is a lot to be said that a lot of people tend to have, especially early on, they tend to have like not necessarily freakouts, but moments of panic. And a lot of times those moments of panic come from trying to resist the substance coming on, which it's a losing battle because like literally just because of biochemistry you can't do anything about it once it's in. Like once you eat an edible, there is a point that most people experience if they eat an edible Because you go about 30 minutes, maybe an hour, where it's like, this isn't really doing anything. And then suddenly, like, you start to feel it creep in. And you're like, oh, shit. You know, like, everything starts to, like, you start to feel, you start to hear music differently. Your thought patterns seem differently. And if you're not ready for it, it could be potentially a moment of panic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which is why sometimes you get a lot of advice of like, well, you just relax and settle into it. Don't fight it. Just let it, wash over.
Easier said than done.
So we're talking about marijuana. The next one is marijuana. It's something called G13. Not that I don't know if you guys would know about like the particular strain because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of strains.
G13.
Correct? Like weird ass.
Yeah.
Like names, like some of them are like called
so
like
many.
John Stramos and like all kinds of crazy made up names that people come up with.
Yeah.
It's almost like different flavors, but I'm confused to know why there are different strains. Does it taste different when there's a different? Like I'm confused. I don't know anything about it.
I have a friend who's like I would call a weed sommelier, and he can detect that stuff. I can't really. There are different aromatics, like they smell differently one from the other, and apparently the different aromatics also can indicate like the particularities of like the chemical structure of the THC, which is the active element in cannabis. So I guess to answer your question, I would say there must be some sort of definitive like difference between strains, because just to further go on into this tangent, I would say this is kind of legend, but there is talk about how weed apparently in the 60s or previously before now was much stronger than weed that we have now, because the cannabis plant has been bred for specific traits over time, and because of that breeding, apparently it's affected to some degree like the kind of effects people have from it. Because there's been a lot of like in older media, the notion that I seem to get from weed is that people would have more visual effect, visual hallucination. I've only ever had that once, and it was like a really high dose. And I unfortunately watched a series finale of 30 Rock while on it. And like, that was the only time that I've said that I've watched something and hallucinated, because I saw things in the series finale of 30 Rock that I do not think were there. Like leprechauns and werewolves.
Oh, weird.
Like secret messages that I was like, this cannot possibly be happening. Because A, it's not funny. And then B, like, why would anybody watch this? Like,
I'm curious to know, because Danielle, you mentioned that you smoke or you consume marijuana frequently. I don't know how you go about it, ingesting it, but I'm curious to know, do you typically keep with one particular strain, and do you see, is it chaotic in terms of the effects that it has, or is it pretty consistent? That's something I'm curious about. Like, do you have like if you do the same strain of marijuana 100 times in a row, is it usually the same experience, or is it a roll of the dice every time? I'm very curious to know, because maybe that's what the different strains are about. I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I take edibles every night pretty much, and the guy that I get them from, I don't know what strain they are particularly. But yeah, I would say it's the same experience across the board with when you're doing the same strain. Me and Matt were talking about this the other night. I have like some chocolates and some caramels, and apparently these caramels are a different strain, or they're just like a higher milligram, because me and Matt both had like a pretty uncomfortable experience with them.
Right.
But I'm assuming it's because of the dosage. It's an extremely high dosage.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're looking back at the paintings of the portraits guy, and I'm looking at G13, and feel free to speak if you've had that particular strain, but that does not look fun. It does look very similar to what Matt was talking about with the interstellar concept of time and all the strings and everything. That reminds me of that, but he does not look like that to me. Even though it's marijuana, says bath salts. Like if I didn't know which drug he had taken, despite the pot leaf on his forehead, I would have said bath salts because that looks disturbing.
Yeah, that's too much. I'm not trying to do that.
I get the sense from this picture that he has, I guess, experienced some sort of transformative experience. Like he seems it doesn't necessarily look like bliss, but it looks like some kind of intellectual peak, basically. That's what I get from it. Like there's a lot of focus on intellect, especially with the canvas squarely on his forehead, which was something that was in the other picture.
Yeah, it almost looks religious now that you say that.
Yeah,
I get there is so that's not necessarily pleasurable, but it's like I don't know, must be powerful. Must have been
some kind of epiphany.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. This next one, I wish my little sister was on this podcast because she knows all about this from her days in the hospital. Morphine 4. I don't know how there's different dosages unknown, but he looks like a rock.
He looks dead.
He looks like a rock monster from Neverending Story, mixed with Stonehenge, like that. There's like a mix of that. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm trying to figure out what it looks like. It's cut out or something. Like the
collage.
Yeah, it looks like a collage method that he used to put it together. That's the other thing. That's another thing that I was thinking about and forgot to really mention these other paintings is that the methods that he's using for each one might speak to something about how he's feeling on each substance.
Yeah, because he's not using the same media every time. It's 100%. Nope. I'm curious to know. I wish I could ask him that if he just had all different materials and he chose which one based off the vibe, you know?
Yeah. And I don't necessarily know what that means to using the cutout or collage style, but it does seem to indicate some kind of feeling of not totally together or you know what I mean? Kind of fractured.
Yeah.
Well, to me, only this is just based off of my understanding of morphine and never having had it. It numbs you to the point where you don't really feel anything physically, and I almost feel like when you're on that kind of a feeling, it's like, oh, I'm invincible. You know what I mean? You can't hurt me. And he looks very stone here. Like it's not stone, like a rock. Like he's very,
that's
very.
That's very morbid.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're invulnerable, you're dead.
Yeah.
So the next one, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. Psilocybin mushrooms.
You got it.
Did I?
First try.
Did I really?
You got it.
To me, I'm looking at this, and this must be what people who are afraid of clowns see when they see a clown. I don't particularly have that phobia, but I might if this is what I saw. Wow.
What's funny about this picture is this is pretty accurate with the feeling of shrooms.
Wow.
I describe every time I've taken shrooms, I've described it as you enter into shroom space, and shroom space is it's like Looney Tunes. Everything becomes way more animated. Plants seem like they're animated, like old cartoon animated. Like they're gonna have a big smile on their face and dance around the place, you know. It's really interesting too because he indicates on this picture all this patterning, and something that is very much a part of a lot of shroom experiences is that you start to see patterns form in odd places. I've looked up in the sky and seen geodesic patterns on the sky, or he pays a lot of attention to his beard hair.
Yeah,
and that's very particular with shrooms because one of the effects of psilocybin is that it it enhances your visual acuity. And it's one of the first things you really notice as it starts to come on is you start to like really stare intensely at really finely detailed things, and you can notice in ways you wouldn't notice with normal vision, like how detailed things are. Like not necessarily like you can like your eyes don't become microscopes necessarily, but it just like it for whatever reason enhances your ability to pay more attention to all the little fractal details of ordinary life.
So let me pick both of your brains about this then. So then, oddly enough, mushrooms, like we were talking about, where like even with pot, it's more of like a creative space where you're just kind of like reflecting, observing, thinking, that kind of stuff. Would you say that if you were struggling with a particular piece that you were working on, like artistically, that you might be able, like if you could self-identify what your problem was, like what you were holding back, that you could be able to look at something and say, you know what, if I smoke a little weed, I might be able to solve this problem. Or if I had some of these mushrooms, then I could narrow in on that detail and I could think about it in that headspace. And tomorrow when I come back to this sober, I'll be able to nail in on that better. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, could it almost be considered part of like the research of when you're in your brainstorming, like an art, and not even talking about like concept. I'm just talking about like execution or technique.
I personally would never use shrooms in that capacity because for myself, I've only ever used shrooms as like a psychotherapeutical aspect.
Yeah.
So like to deal like if I'm wanting to do some kind of psychological healing, I've used shrooms in that way to help me work through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my answer, I guess. Danielle, do you have any response to that?
Yeah, I mean, trying to think. I think the issue with weed sometimes is that it can make me a little apathetic. So to what you were saying about like finishing a project or whatever, I think weed can be an issue with that. But I have been microdosing a psilocybin tincture, which I've noticed does give me like more energy, and it'll kind of help me get out of like a funk sometimes.
Okay. So
to finish projects.
It's almost like I don't want to. It's like a drug version of an energy drink or something like that. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, kind of feels like it sometimes.
This next one, listen. I have actually. I don't know if this would be considered a substance. I have smoked cloves. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't, I've never actively thought that affected my mind state. So I don't consider it doing a substance, but the next one that he did it was 2 milligrams, and I don't know how much that is. But I know how much a gram is, and I know a milligram must not be that much, but it says nicotine gum. And I don't think that nicotine gum could fuck you up enough to do what I'm looking at. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm wondering the same thing too. I'm like, shit.
That is, I don't know. Maybe this is a joke. You know what I mean? Like he's just joking.
I don't know. Like there is a slight buzz with nicotine, but it's never. I mean, in comparison to cannabis or anything, it's not like. Yeah, it's not like what this.
This is a very singular. It's like Picasso did a pen and ink type thing with like a one color watercolor background, and that was it. I don't know. I don't know what to interpret from this.
I don't either.
It's a surprising effect compared to the other drugs that he did. I'm like, this is what nicotine gum did to you.
But then, you know what? And this is also something to consider, because I was reading the article before we went on air, and he did end up having he admitted he has like a mental retardation. Like it definitely affected his mind because he did this for 50 straight days. And it was a different drug every day. So I'm curious to know if this is just because of the combination of the drugs that were already affected his brain, and then some that might have still been in his system intertwining.
You might have the culprit there.
That
actually.
might
Yeah,
explain why the nicotine gum went this direction, because I don't see that. That's not the kicker. I think he just, assigned it because that was what he did that day, but I can't see that happening. Next
Yeah.
up is, it almost looks like something that you would draw, right, Matt? This looks like an art school, like not a life drawing, but like a charcoal life drawing, right? Isn't that what, like the new models and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff? But almost
Yeah.
in a cartoon
it's-
type
it's-
style for nitrous oxide, which is
yeah,
that laughing gas?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it is. Isn't that what they give you like when you get like a root canal?
I think
Maybe.
so. They gave it to my wife when she was in labor, and she was so pissed because it didn't work. And apparently she had never had it. She had never had laughing gas when she went and got like dental work done. And so when because she didn't want to get a spinal tap, and when they were like, "Do you want something for the pain?" She was like, "Well, what can you offer?" And they were like, "Oh, we can give you laughing gas." She was like, "I'll take it." And I'm looking at her, I'm going, that shit doesn't work. Like, they've given it to me when I've had dental work, and I'm just like, what is this nonsense?
Yeah.
I taste cotton candy, but that's it. But he must not have been as affected by the drugs, the previous drugs that day, because this is a little bit
Yeah.
more coherent.
It's more coherent, and he looks very happy
Blissful,
in this
yeah.
picture.
Yeah. It's
Uh.
almost pleasant, except for the lack of like colors and everything.
Yeah. Right.
I'm misinterpreting it, I know it, but I almost want to say it looks more feminine, and I think that comes from the fact that it's, I don't know if this was intentional, but there's little lines coming up from the eyelids, and I've noticed this lately, but in cartoons, women are the only one who have eyelashes. And so I'm reading too far into it. I'm seeing those as eyelashes being drawn on the figure, and that's why I'm
I
interpreting
was
it
either
more
those
feminine.
are eyelashes, or I kind of went a little morbid, and like they almost look like stitches.
Yeah.
I can see that,
oh,
too.
Yeah, I can see that now.
Because they are crossing the line all the way
Yeah,
through. They're
exactly.
not stopping on the line, so I could see that. Yeah.
So I don't know if he was just so fucked up, like
He
on
couldn't
nitrous
control
oxide
himself,
that, like,
or yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wonder.
But
Looking at that.
that's the fun, is trying to interpret what's going on or whatever. Okay, so opium. I'm looking at this, and this explains a lot of art from the history that I've seen from like Eastern art, like historical Eastern art, because this looks very much in that style. When opium
The
was a
line work-
big thing.
Yeah, the line work definitely gives me that sense. And also like the patterning is really interesting.
Yeah. Patterns are cool.
It is kind of fucked up though. It like,
He looks like he is
how many eyeballs does he have?
A lot.
But I can't tell if it's a butterfly on his face or if it's his eye. There's a lot of things you could see depending on how, like, what you're focusing in on.
It's interesting too because the opium is related to morphine, and this is another picture that kind of has a certain amount of fractured aspect to it.
Yeah. Wow.
It's almost like 3D in a way.
Yes. Yeah, I could see that. Where, yeah, and it's just, it's basically a grayscale painting, but it's yeah. There is a little bit of red. I don't know if that's intentional or not. I don't know if that's intentional, but I'm seeing little dabbles of red here and there. Huh.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got some stuff written up there.
All right, so PCP looks like the thumbnail sketches that were done for scary stories to tell. But you know what I'm talking about? The book with the skull smoking the...
yes.
It looks like the thumbnail sketch version of those finished pieces.
It looks like he could barely sit down to draw it. Like,
yeah.
He kind of just was like, okay, I'm going to draw this, and then I need to go run out of the house, basically.
I mean, it's weird.
Can't sit still.
I'm seeing, like, I can definitely make out a face. It looks more like a full body thing where he's almost like sitting. I can see his foot and his leg tucked underneath. I cannot tell if the other one is his foot or his penis. It looks like I'm definitely seeing. I'm. There might be some Freudian shit going on here, but I'm seeing a ball sack and a very phallic penis at the very end, right near his glasses, and it could either be his foot or his penis. I can't tell.
I think that's a foot.
Thanks, Rainwater.
The way
You're not
Pretty
helping
sure
my
that's
cause. But definitely underneath is definitely a foot, and it looks like he's drinking or smoking. I
It
can't.
looks like he's out of his fucking mind.
Yeah.
Like he's out of his body. Yeah, that's one drug I've never wanted to try.
And it looks like there's letters that are like evaporating off of him. I don't know. They're like, it's like I don't know. It's like a smoke of letters or symbols that are coming off the back of him.
Yeah, it's like OOUU.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So Percocet looks like an angry drunk.
Getting back to color.
Yes, we are back to color finally.
Yeah, I got some color.
But it looks like an angry drunk.
That's how I would view it similarly, in that vein. And definitely like a lot of like focus on the eyes.
Yeah.
Eyes pop pretty hard. So I would guess from looking at Percocet that this is actually a pretty like mentally active one. And more of the work that's being done is sort of intentional and intellectual, basically.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out because Percocet it's a pain pill. I've tried it before, and I don't know that I would feel this way. I mean, he looks really angry almost, even though there's color. So I'm like trying to figure out.
So I think we're all in agreement. He's very angry in this particular thing, and I'm very curious. This is a question that's going to come up out of this, and this is, I don't know how related to art this is, but it's just still related to the substance topic. Is there a part, because at this point he's been on drugs for many days, weeks even.
Yeah.
We've gone through so many paintings and stuff. Is there a point where you just say, I've had so much fucking enough, I need to be sober for a couple of days, I need to stop this? Because it's almost like me and food, where like I'll have a Ben and Jerry's every fucking night for 2 weeks, and then I'll just be like, I can't eat Ben and Jerry's again, I gotta stop, like I'm done, there's no appeal to it anymore. And I almost feel like that might be the vibe that he's giving off in this, where it's just like, I fucking hate that I'm doing this. Why did I fucking do this? And it's amplified by the Percocet, I guess, or I don't know.
Oh yeah, I totally see that.
But then,
I mean, I've gotten into a space where I would prefer being sober most of the time, unless I'm just like in the mood to, get drunk or get high or whatever.
Sure.
But I don't know, I guess maybe because I'm older or whatever, but I'm in a place lately where it's like, if I'm going to use a substance, I'm going to be really intentional about it, and I'm going to be doing it for some kind of specific purpose, basically.
Oddly enough, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding would assume that this is another strain of marijuana, but Salvia divinorum? Does anybody know what this is?
Salvia divinorum is not marijuana.
Okay.
It is a plant. It's a plant psychedelic.
Okay.
But it's interesting because this picture does not match any description of Salvia divinorum I've ever read.
Okay.
Because so many of the trip reports for Salvia divinorum sound kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
Where like reality gets ripped apart, and then like you're attacked by interdimensional creatures and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it like this, and this is like a really pleasing looking painting.
This is very
like, this is the first painting
Warhol-ish.
Yes. This is
yeah.
the first painting I've looked at where I'm like, oh, this is like
That's nice.
I want to see this on a Coke can or something.
Yeah, like I might want to try it.
Yes, that would definitely fall under false advertising, given what Matt just described the
Exactly.
the described experiences are. Okay, wow. 100 milligrams of Seroquel?
Seroquel.
Seroquel. I never even heard of this. I don't know what this is.
I've taken it before for insomnia, and yeah, it kind of feels like that.
So would you say so when you say it feels like that, when you're describing it, like that's what you see, or that's just a great representation of the feeling?
It's just a great representation because
Okay.
it just like in this picture, he just looks so like defeated.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
guess is how I would describe it.
Yeah, it's very
And I mean,
pencil. It's kind of bland and irony and
yeah, very gray, and his eyes look really tired.
we already did this one, right? The Soma. That was the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why that one repeated. Okay, this one is very interesting. Tramadol.
Oh. Tramadol is a painkiller. This is interesting.
Looks like Tobias Fuke was was the mascot for a Chinese food company.
This is a really good drawing, though. It's like really, it's like anatomically, it's really well studied, and it has a lot of energy to it. I'd love to watch a cartoon animated like this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But I don't know anything. I don't know enough about tramadol to comment any further.
I'm looking at the next one, Trazodone, 100 milligrams, and I don't know what to make of it. It looks like a cyborg drawing with some. I don't know. There's a lot of concentration on like a spine.
Yeah, this is actually kind of disturbing looking.
Yeah, I want to say trazodone is an antidepressant or like an anti-anxiety medicine somewhat related to that area.
But this will fuck you up. This is not looking like a fun experience in any way, shape, or form.
It says next day. So like, what does that mean?
Yeah, there's it's like a diagram of like a surgical procedure or something where there's like something like a screw being put into your spine, and then there's like math equations and a little like an abdomen thought bubble.
It looks like he has like his eyeball, like his retina is being examined.
Yeah. And there's like a thorn in his side, so it's probably, we talked about the compound reactions of all of these different things. I'm guessing his appendix might have been hurting at this point because
something was going on.
There's something going on inside his body that he is not happy with. And then he got happy because the next one is Valium. And
yeah.
Nice.
It's a very fuzzy drawing.
Yeah. This one is probably one of the happiest I've seen. He's actually smiling in the photo too, or the portrait. And the fuzziness of the line work is comforting. It should be chaotic, but it's comforting.
Yeah, it's not like the PCP portrait where it looked very rushed and haphazard. This looks like the lines seem thoughtful, and he's enjoying drawing.
And the way they were executed was very like you can feel the energy that was coming through him when he did that line work. So it's not chaotic. It's peaceful, but it looks chaotic in a way. It's contradictory in the way I'm describing it, but when you see it, it's like, wow, huh.
I've never taken Valium. I have no idea what it's like, but I think it's an antidepressant. Do you happen to know, Danielle?
It's used for anxiety.
Okay.
So he looks like he's in a really comfy place, like he's at ease. That's kind of like the feeling that it gives you.
I think he's captured that quite well. So
Yeah,
props to the artist.
sure.
And then we're moving to Xanax, which is also isn't that like a sibling of
Yeah, it's
Valium?
for anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one I would not say as happy. It's almost
No.
depressed but peaceful. There's color.
That's what I get the sense of.
He
Yeah.
looks
It
tired.
definitely seems peaceful.
There's a slight curl to the mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's harmony but chaos. It's a really beautiful. I mean, and well, I guess that's what we're kind of getting at with a lot of these things is that it's really there are possibilities to implement both techniques and principles of art design that your brain meshes together that you normally wouldn't. So I guess you could say that some of these things are in fact a attribute of using the substances is that you break rules not even realizing it and somehow you're able to make it work. Like, you know what I mean?
Are you often, I mean, I can imagine if this guy is going through this process in a very, assuming he's going through this process in an intentional way, he's probably trying to pay extra attention to the different emotional states he's in with each drug. And so I get the sense that he is, because I don't know, like not necessarily everybody's going to give the same amount of effort of trying to communicate what they're feeling, which I feel like what he's doing from portrait to portrait. And an interesting aspect of taking drugs is that over time you become more aware of your internal mechanisms basically, and figuring out how to communicate them to the outside world if you're going into it deliberately and consciously anyway.
Let me ask you guys this, because again, I don't know. I talked about before about being the guy on the side of the fence watching everybody else on the other side of the party, and Matt, you just brought up the thing about when you've done them for a significant amount of time or whatever like that. I'm curious to know from the two of you if you've noticed that it does make you more observational of things that you miss when you're sober. Do you know what I mean? Like, does it sharpen that acuity of, you know what I mean? Like when you're sober, it's almost like you appreciate being sober a little bit more and you don't take for granted the things that you take for granted. Does that make sense?
That's I mean, I would say I definitely find when I'm sober, I'm more attentive now and paying better attention to stuff
because you weren't when you were high
from those experiences, for sure. Those are having experiences of being, especially shrooms, because shrooms is like a kind of high where marijuana kind of adjusts your neurology such that you're a little bit left of center or right of center of the world, you're just a little bit outside of it. But shrooms is you're somewhere else in a sense. And so when you come back into reality, it's easier to pay attention to what you're looking at, and like you're saying, you don't take it for granted as much, I feel like. Or it really adjusts the way that I look at the world, I guess, is another way of putting it.
Danielle,
what about you, Danielle?
Yeah, I agree. I think I notice more things now. I'll notice other people's mannerisms, or I'll just dissect things more, so to speak. It's hard to explain, but I pay attention to things differently now.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, right? Isn't that that's what a lot of people say about the thing about substances is that they talk about it opening up, their viewpoints to things that they had overlooked or never even considered before. I'm trying not to. If there are any children listening to this podcast, I'm not trying to glorify substance use.
Right.
But
yeah, none of us are.
I also feel like being
honest
about things
yes,
is the best way to earn people's understanding of them, because it will be less likely to lead to self-destructive patterns. So it's
Yes.
kind of like
And
don't.
I 100% agree with that, Joe, because I feel like a well-informed populace is one that can make decisions that won't, like you're saying, won't lead to destructive behavior. I think people need to understand with any substance what they're going to get into if they decide to take it, because if you like, for example, take MDMA at a party and you have no idea what MDMA is, what it does to your brain, to your body, you're putting yourself in danger. You know, like you're putting yourself in danger because you're going into it with very little information.
Yeah.
Same way, like you wouldn't buy $100,000 of a stock without first, like, you know, looking at the fundamentals, or at least getting an idea of what something about the company. In the same way, like you're putting something in your body, you need to know what is that chemical you're going to put in your body, what is the impact it's going to have on you, short term, long term, et cetera.
But then again, there are people who just willy-nilly do things without looking into them, like me, who just threw a bunch of money into Dogecoin because Matt told me it was a good idea.
Well, I did too. That's different.
But you know, I think it's important to talk about these things. But I'm not saying I'm gonna go run out and try drugs, but that, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm having this discussion with you two, and you know, it definitely, at least the ideas are coming through this guy's work. So it's almost like he's a guinea pig for me to look at something and consider it. So I don't have to actually do the drug, but I am definitely, because I'm looking so far into it about it, like I'm getting ideas in my head. So it's almost like how you were talking before, Matt, about how the comic creators that you were influenced by were, you know, probably heavy pot smokers or using other substances or whatever. So to ask the two of you to get back onto the topic and away from this article that our listeners can't really see.
I would before we get back on the topic, I would just recommend, for people who want to learn more about the specifics of any given substance, there is a site called Erowid, EROWIE.org, and they've compiled, it's a community that's compiled hundreds and hundreds of what they call trip reports, so that you can see from individual anecdotal experience how people have felt under certain substances.
Wow.
And they give information as to, like, what is the lethal dose of the substance, what's the impact of it on your body. Like, it is an informational resource for people who are interested in taking substances but want to be safe and want to be careful. So that's all I had to say. Arrowwood.org, I highly recommend it.
For the sake of our legal asses, I'm going to say that maybe consult your doctor and also do your due diligence before you try any particular substance, because I'm sure a lethal dosage probably differs on your age, gender, weight, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, your health habits, all that kind of jazz. But yeah, so I'm curious to know from the two of you, there are obviously, as artists, we are influenced by other artists. So I'm curious to know if there were any artists that were very apparent to you that were probably using substances that maybe influenced you to try that particular substance. I'm just curious to know if there's any, because like I look at things like Alan Moore, and it's very clear 100%. That man was doing some fucking shit when he did his work. But he is revered as one of the greatest artists in, I guess you could say, just storytelling. I don't want to say comics, because I don't want to say that's like a curse word, because I don't think comics are a bad thing, or, you know, trivial or meaningless or anything like that, or childish. But just in general, like, his stories are pretty crazy, and they're awesome and really deep and thoughtful. So, like, I've done like some research on Alan Moore and tried to see what kind of things that he was into, and not that I've tried any of them, but like it made me a little bit more, I don't want to say susceptible, but intrigued by possibilities. So I'm curious to know if that has had any influence on either of you.
Yeah, do you want to take that first, Danielle?
Yeah, I honestly can't think of anyone right now. So okay. I mean, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I don't know, like I said earlier in the podcast, pretty much all of the artists that I've been interested in, with the exception of Frank Zappa, who Frank Zappa was totally straight edge except for nicotine. Like he smoked like a fucking volcano, but I guess that was his drug of choice.
Sure.
But he was avidly against using. I mean, he was avidly for himself against using cannabis or alcohol or anything like that. I think because for him, he was just like he must have had some kind of natural high or something where it was just like he didn't feel like his creativity needed to be enhanced through using substances. But Alan Moore, like you were saying, the writer Robert Anton Wilson, very very much like a cannabis advocate and had done a lot of other like heavier psychedelic drugs in his past. And then the big one for me, and I mean, I guess I would still call him an artist, is this. I don't know how to define this guy. This orator by the name of Terence McKenna, who
Oh shit, yeah.
has a very curious and interesting history that I won't go into, but he did lots and lots of psychedelics, lots and lots of cannabis, and his big one was he was both a shrooms guy, and his other big one was DMT, which
I've
is
heard of this.
as a psychedelic supposed to be the I guess I don't know what to call it, the Holy Grail or whatever, but it's the one that people have a lot of trip reports where people say that they felt like they went to an alternate reality and spoke to aliens and all this other stuff. And it's one of the more curious. It was one of his big talking points, and so I say he was a master of the spoken word. I don't know if that was just the influence of the shrooms on him or what. Like he speculated a lot that maybe maybe the shrooms had some impact on like his ability to speak because he was incredibly eloquent. And so I definitely say that he had a pretty big impact on my curiosity towards trying psychedelics specifically.
Not that we've kind of been heavy on the particulars of drugs, and I'm curious to know because I'm sure, but I'm not going to be assuming. I'm not condescending, but I'm sure. I know Matt, you have. I don't know Danielle, but we're gonna wrap up here with alcohol, which seems to be the mortal enemy of a lot of people who are advocating for legalization of drugs. I don't know why so many potheads are very, very, very hateful of alcoholics, or I don't want to call them alcoholics, but alcohol users. It's weird. But I'm curious to know, because again, I have not had a drink, how that particular substance, because Matt, I remember when we were in college, you and Joker used to go, and there was something called drink and draw. And I'm just very curious to know like what the experience was with that. And then Danielle, if you have any insight to if alcohol is something that you have found has helped with anything that you've designed, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, it's funny too because back at SCAD, I actually didn't drink at all. I did go to drink and draws, but I didn't drink, and I didn't drink until I was like 26, I think.
Wow.
And the main issue for me was I was just sort of alcohol was something where I was concerned about like maybe I would like it too much and like get into substance abuse.
Sure.
But I've drank enough times where I don't like the next day impact of alcohol.
Okay.
So my body is apparently like just attuned to not wanting to get drunk that often. Like Friday, like last Friday, I went out and had like a martini, and that was it because that was like all I was in the mood for.
Sure.
But more specific to your question, honestly I think that a lot of cannabis or drug advocates are upset with alcohol probably because alcohol is not prohibited anymore. And there are a lot of these other drugs that, like for instance with cannabis doesn't have the same negative impacts on the body that alcohol has, and generally has medicinal purposes, and alcohol doesn't have any sort of net medicinal purposes. So it seems for a lot of people that it is like there's a major bias against cannabis versus alcohol, which has these net negatives, is totally legal in the world, and in every, in all 50 states people can go drink, but for some reason people can't be free to take this medicine. And that's usually the argument that is used by a lot of drug advocates, especially cannabis advocates. And I mean, like, there's certainly a lot of truth to what they're saying, but for me personally, like, I don't have anything against alcohol. I have some feelings against the laws regarding substances, right? I think I personally think it might be unfair to people who want to use cannabis, that in certain states they can face penalization, right? Either through fines or through criminal, like, going to jail for possession. So to me, that to me seems like the argument, or what the argument is ultimately about, is like, why can't people just, specifically with cannabis, why can't people just do cannabis? I'm not sure about every drug, but anyway, Danielle, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot with what you said. I think a lot of stoners just want alcoholics to, like, replace their glass of wine or a beer with a blunt, is what that
Come join our team.
is.
It's very welcoming and loving. So I'm just very curious, and then we'll kind of wrap up on this because we are going way into the end zone on this subject. But if you are on a substance while you're listening to this, you probably don't mind. But I just wanted to wrap up with this. My understanding of alcohol, which might be greater this summer if I get cleared of my allergy, which fingers crossed I will, is quote unquote liquid courage. So I'm curious to know, I mean, obviously if you take too much alcohol, you're going to be incoherent and you're not going to be able to quote unquote art as well as you would if you were sober. But I'm curious to know if you think that maybe when you had a little bit of alcohol, or maybe if there's another substance that might cause this particular effect, you two can educate me, that you might be more bold in terms of what you might create. Because I think a lot of artists are very introspective people. They have deep thoughts. They're very self-examining. They're very observant of society and others. And while that is an attribute, sometimes bringing things to the surface can be scary for people, especially the audience, and they don't necessarily want to address things. And an artist, and we're all, as artists, I know we are all very insecure and just want to be loved and felt accepted, and that's something that's very human, but I think artists feel a little bit more deeply. But I'm curious to know if alcohol or any other substance maybe allows you to be a little bit more bold with your art, which is something that every artist kind of aspires to, is to do the thing that others won't, because that is what it essentially will make your art stand above. So I'm curious to know if there's any substance that might be that particular attribute other than alcohol, or if alcohol is just the one that does it.
I mean, alcohol can do that for sure. It's not something I would do for everyday creation personally, but there have been a couple of times where, like, I've drawn after having a drink, and I am looser in my drawing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I am, like, a little less inhibited. And I think there's certainly, a glass of wine a day or something, Yeah. I can't argue against that. That's fine, What do you think, Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it definitely makes me feel looser, like more uninhibited. So I would agree with that.
Do you guys think that that maybe certain substances apply better or worse for depending on which medium you work in? Because like I said before earlier in the podcast, there's a stigma that writers are very much alcoholics, where it's like, they have to be bold in what they're doing because their work is about a particular, a story or a concept, and they have to have bold ideas that leap off the page. It's just black and white text, and if it's not interesting and courageous and risky, people are just going to throw it away after 2 pages. Whereas with an illustration or a painting or whatever like that, it's one particular thing, and you're looking at it, and it, you know what I mean? Like, you have different things in your arsenal that you can use that alcohol would not be necessarily, helpful for. But something.
This is all theory, but sure. I would guess that weed is great for music. I would just
Yeah.
from personal experience, I mean, I feel like a ton of musicians must smoke weed before they perform because it seems like the kind of high that allows you to kind of like clue in to your environment and really feel things.
Yeah.
And so much of music is about feeling just because it's an acoustic property as opposed to like a visual or static property like like drawing
But
or
here's the thing.
film or whatever.
This is what I'm thinking about though. Is like alcohol might be more helpful to a jazz artist than it would be to a rock and roll artist, because a jazz artist, you're just kind of free flowing and you're making up music on the spot, whereas you might need to be a little bit more bold to be like, hey, you know what? I'm stealing the tune and I'm changing the rhythm right here, and that's just where it goes. Whereas a rock and roll artist, you know what I mean? Like, you're playing the hits on stage.
It's interesting
Don't fucking
that you point that out.
change the
It's
melody.
interesting that you point that out because jazz was infamously linked with cannabis
Right.
use.
Yeah.
A lot of jazz artists smoked a lot of pot, and I'm guessing because pot must have helped them more than alcohol, although certainly alcohol goes hand in hand with most musicians because most musicians
Playing
play where
clubs
alcohol
and-
is present.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, I think music in general might be not just alcohol, not just weed, but just substances in general. Like MDMA pretty much defined the rave scene across the world for a while because the rave music and MDMA just seem to go hand in hand for whatever reason.
See, and my problem has been I watch a lot of movies, whether they're Hollywood or indie, and marijuana has been a staple of Hollywood. Like, most people know that if you're in LA or whatever like that, it's like commonplace that marijuana has always been like a thing there. And I watch movies and people, like the artists who created them, are very open about their pot usage. And I'm looking at these movies going, this is fucking shit. Like, if this is the product that marijuana is producing, I don't wanna. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it really is interesting for me because like that's just where I'm coming from with it, where it's like I'm that critical asshole. It's like, this is not interesting to me. Whereas, like you said before, Matt, where it might just be more interesting to pot smokers that
And I wonder about that sometimes, and that's something that I kind of personally it's also kind of a reason why I try and not link too much of my creativity to drug use too, because I'll say this, like, I definitely can get some great ideas right from being stoned, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all my great ideas come from being stoned. A lot of my great ideas just come from being around in the world when I'm sober and just doing whatever, or maybe, I have a great conversation one night after having a couple of drinks or whatever, but it's different ideas come from all sorts of different sources, but I definitely think that my most deliberate and intentional and consciously aware ideas come from sobriety, basically. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Danielle?
Yeah, pretty much same. I mean, a lot of my thoughts also come from just like talking to people, being out in the world, noticing how people interact, things like that. But I mean, I think, what's that?
No, I was just gonna ask, like, so you do like a lot of T-shirt designs and stuff like that. So I'm very curious to know, like, just like well, I don't want to say T-shirts. It's just like apparel, like how substances. How do you think it's not affected, but attributed to your work? Is there like a favorite piece that you've done or anything like that? I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about your company before we wrap up, because I realize we haven't talked about it that much.
Well, it's interesting talking about drugs and stuff. I did do a design that was like a parody off of the DARE program. It's called Dare to Take 5 Dried Grams in Silent Darkness.
It's a reference to a Terence McKenna quote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because The 5 milligrams in Silent Darkness was like he had this idea of like there's a heroic dose of mushrooms that you can take, and if you take that, you're going to like have the reality pilling experience and have an experience with like the entities on the other side and all this other stuff. And so that's kind of where that saying comes from, basically.
See, I hear a challenge about taking a certain amount of like a substance, and I immediately see the robot from Lost in Space in my head going, "Danger, Will Robinson!" Gotcha. Like that's the anyone who dares me to not to take a drug, but to take a certain amount called a heroic dose. That to me just screams, you need to leave, Andrew.
I think it's totally fair, and it's definitely called a heroic dose for a reason, because people who come back from that experience definitely describe having had a life-altering experience.
Wow.
And so don't go lightly into it, basically.
Well, I want to thank Danielle for coming on. You've definitely been a great guest. We loved having you and having you speak with your experiences on stuff. Your company is No Brow Apparel. The best way to find your stuff is on Instagram, or do you have a website? Is there any?
I'm on Etsy.
Etsy. You
can find me on Etsy. Yeah.
Awesome. And Matt, you do some of the design work, correct? For that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
I wish I could get my little sister to work with me on stuff, because she's a very talented musical artist. Well, not musical artist, but she's definitely a phenomenal singer. She's got a voice that could shake the heavens.
That's awesome.
But she's very timid about it, and she doesn't like she doesn't like the spotlight. But either way, I think this has been a great episode. We've gone 2 hours, and we haven't looped it. So that's the real accomplishment here, is that we didn't loop anything. We had a very interesting discussion for 2 hours with a great guest and a great topic. I didn't think we were going to be able to milk this much out of 420 Day. I just thought we would, try and get the holiday hits, no pun intended. But this has been a great episode. So I definitely think we should have you back on. I know we're going to be Matt is currently in discussions with someone possibly who's going to come on and talk about costuming and fashion design and such. So that is to be looked upon in the future. And Danielle, I think we would be great to have you back on where we could talk about other things. We don't have to talk about drugs with you every time. I'm sure you're more than just that topic.
Down to talk about drugs, but yeah.
But no, this has been a great discussion, and I just wanted to say thank you for contributing. Matt, as always, a pleasure to have you. This is going to be our 420 episode. I have no idea what we'll talk about on 420 next year. But I'll try and squeeze some kind of new gimmick out of it. But for now, I guess that's it. If anybody wants to check out the YouTube version of this particular podcast, because I will be sticking the paintings that we were talking about up as a visual aid. So in case you're wondering what the hell we were talking about, probably should have prefaced that earlier so you could just jump there. But maybe you're awesome and you listen to us twice. We are getting more and more hits as it goes on. Thank you, listeners, and we will be back next week. Take care.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right. Later.